So today's question is, can I buy property online remotely without traveling to Turkey physically? Let's get into this topic. So it is possible, but in order to make this a pleasant experience and safe experience, there are certain steps and procedures that I would recommend you to follow when buying property remotely in Turkey. So step number one is basically doing the general research, a general research of how property buying process works. What are the steps to buying property, even in person? What are the rough steps and general procedures and rules and regulations for buying property? So just doing a little bit of research online before you think of doing the online part. Doing just a general research about that would be beneficial. That's one. That's part A, let's say, of step one. Part B is, of course, looking at the market, also researching the general market, investing in Turkey. Is that a good option? That goes without saying. That needs to be done as part of your step one research. Now let's move on to step two. So step two is basically you need to make a decision on who to work with, which firm or which company, consultancy firm that you need to hire in order to facilitate this buying of property online for yourself. This part is very important, and this is going to be one of the key kind of parts that will either make or break your transaction, whether it's going to be a successful one or just a nightmare of an experience. So in this part, what you need to do is be making thorough research of what kind of companies and property experts, consultants are out there. What are they offering? You need to engage with a few of these, shortlist a few of them, and obviously start talking to them and asking them questions, interviewing them in a manner of speaking to make sure whether or not they can, pass the test, whether they can they have the necessary knowledge and expertise to assist your specific case. So step three is that once you've decided on the firm and you've done all that due diligence work and confirmed the firm that you're working with, now you need to be providing them with the necessary information in order for them to explain the specific process for your case. Every case will be slightly different because of the country regulations and so on. So what are the differing factors exactly? Let me explain that to you a little bit. So if you're based in a country which has a Turkish embassy, and that is, working, the Turkish embassy has a process and they're used to working with foreigners buying property remotely, then things become more easier. They already usually have a process in place and they're used to having inquiries based on that. Some countries still, they're working on that, so they might not be so straightforward for dealing with this. So in this stage, you need to figure out, does the country that you're in, does it have a Turkish consulate or Turkish embassy in that country? Number one, right? This is part A. Part B is it part of the apostille convention? A lot of these documents that will be needed will need to be, basically apostille to be accepted in Turkey. Turkey is part of the apostille convention. So therefore, if that country is also part of that, then there is a agreement between the countries and their documents will be accepted and recognized in Turkey. But when it comes to the embassy issue, why am I asking for that is because of the power of attorney eventually that is going to be required. Power of attorney for specific purposes, for the purposes of buying property, and on your behalf, right? So those things are worded very specifically. So they can't really, the attorney and the person who is entrusted with that, the consultant, they cannot really do a lot of things, based on that. So that needs to be checked, of course. When you're looking at the power of attorney, there are specific, powers that are given. So they can only do those specific things like registering the property in your name at the title deed office, signing on your behalf at the title deed office for buying property, the electricity, gas, and water accounts, opening those accounts for you, and so on, and maybe even like for tenants if you need to find tenants. So basically signing on your behalf for those tenancy agreements. Those kinds of things are usually given. So those are limited powers that are assigned. And of course, it's recommended to assign them and to first. That's why the step two is very important, is just to do the research heavily and make sure the firm is qualified, competent, trustworthy enough that you can assign them this power of attorney for that purposes. So here is a bit of confusion as to what if there's no embassy, or if there is an embassy, I can't really go there, and I have to be present there physically. So Turkish embassies also, for the most part, will require a translator. If you don't know Turkish, obviously, most of the people that will be there, they will not know Turkish. So they will need a translator, an official translator, or a certified translator that will go with them to the embassy and make sure that they understand all the documents and translate for them on the spot what's going on. So those are the things also that needs to be checked beforehand. So this is step three. These are all the questions that need to be answered in step three before we move on to the next stage. These need to be clarified. We, of course, do that within our firm. We help you with answering those questions. We figure those things out together with the client. Moving on to step 4. Step 4 is the property searching part. So this part where obviously the firm that you're working with will be sharing the listings, the images and so on of the property videos, doing video calls to show you the property, doing virtual property tours to make sure that you understand the area, the property inside, various features and so on. So this part is quite the interesting and fun part where you're kind of sorting and sifting through different options and figuring out what's going to be the best possible option for you. So once you've kind of figured out, you've honed down a couple of options and you're ready to go on to the next step, then you go into step 5, which is, getting that power of attorney that we talked about earlier, going to the embassy, getting that process. In some cases, some countries, you might not even need to go to the embassy. You might be just fine with getting the apostille done. And that's, we'll have to check that individually, obviously. Each case will differ on this because of, the country itself and also where you're buying the property, the title deed office for that locality. Now, the title deed office sometimes may not be so open to that. Then we're not going to be able to assist. So those things will need to be clarified as well as part of this whole process. Where we're looking at the properties, is the title deed office okay with accepting just apostille power of attorney, or do they need the actual one from the Turkish embassy? Also, you need to look at translators or agencies in your country that can assist you. What are the costs for those and so on. So that's going to be part of the research that we talked about earlier in the previous steps. So step 6 now is to finalize on the property, give the deposit, and basically reserve that property so that nobody else will buy that and pick that up off the market. So once the property is reserved, you have a few, let's say, weeks, depending on the seller, how many weeks you'll get, depends on deal to deal. Usually a couple of weeks is fine. Maybe 2-3 weeks, not longer than that is kind of difficult to get. So once you've got the deposit taken care of, the agreement is in place, the property is reserved, step 7 will be to arrange the funds. So you've got the property reserved, you've given, the deposit, let's say $2,000-$3,000, the property is reserved. So you need to get the rest of the funds to Turkey. So now this is where the question comes, like, I don't have a bank account in Turkey, where do I send the funds to, and how does that work? So in this case, you have a person, a consultant or an attorney that is a reliable, trustworthy consultant attorney with a contractual agreement that can be made on the spot for this specific transaction, for sending the funds to this person, to this lawyer, or to this consultant, and make sure that you have an agreement with that, and that money will be sent to the consultant or the attorney's account as a sort of escrow. Well, they will hold it there until the final title deed day, where the transfer will take place for the property. So that's option A. Option B, if you're dealing with a reliable developer and the consultant has told you that, hey, you can just, that's fine, the developer is trustworthy, they'll make a contract and we'll transfer the money over fully with the sales agreement, and then the title deed transfer day when we have the appointment, we'll get the title deed transferred. So now that we've got the funds sorted out in step 7, now moving on to step 8 is getting the appraisal report done and getting a title deed appointment date for the actual transfer of the title deed to your name. So once we've got that, this will take approximately a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how busy things are at the appraisal companies and also at the title deed office for that specific case. Moving on to step 8, once you've got the title deed transferred, then it's just a matter of, getting that title deed physically, sending you a soft copy of that, and then mailing you the physical copy with a secure courier service, such as DHL, FedEx, TNT, and so on. And that is, my friends, the end of the entire buying property online process. So as you saw, it is a little bit, there are a few steps which can be a bit of a headache to deal with, but as long as you've got those, you're aware of that, and you do the research beforehand, and you clarify those things with us and with, of course, the country that you're dealing with, the embassy or the firms and agencies located within that country, then we can move that along quite easily. So last thing is, what is the actual timeline for buying property online from beginning to end, right? So we can't really say something. What I'm going to say in terms of timeline is, let's say once you've got the power of attorney thing sorted out and the funds are transferred, right? The funds are transferred, because fund transfers also may take a long time, or they might get stuck. If there's no issues with that, then 1 to 2 weeks is more than enough to get the whole process sorted out from beginning to end. So if you have further questions or you're interested in buying property online, feel free to get in touch with our company at the WhatsApp number below, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions and guide you through the process. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.